Hello, my friend. Welcome back to your campsite. The snow is still falling softly outside, but our fire is burning brightly, keeping all the cold away. Inside this little tent, don't you feel perfectly safe and warm? Alright, find your most comfortable position and pull the blankets up close. Tonight, the sound of the wind reminds me of a story from a long, long time ago. A story of courage and of a vast white silence. Now, close your eyes and let my voice guide you there. Our story begins with a heavy wooden door. The last whisper of the fire died in the hearth, leaving the small cabin to the encroaching chill of the October morning. Outside, a fine dusting of snow, the first significant snowfall of the season, softened the jagged edges of the wilderness, transforming the familiar landscape into a canvas of stark white and muted gray. The miner, his breath pluming in the crisp air, stood at the threshold, his heavy pack slung over one shoulder, the gold pouch nested deep within, a warm, resonant weight against his ribs. He cast a final look around the humble dwelling that had been his sanctuary and prison, his workshop and his refuge. The rough-hewn table, the narrow bunk, the tools neatly stacked, each bore the silent imprint of his solitary struggle. A faint smile touched his lips. The cabin, like his body, had been a vessel for transformation. Securing the door with a sturdy chain and padlock, a gesture more symbolic than practical against the vast indifference of winter, he turned his back on the claim. The shaft, a dark maw into the earth's bounty, was shored and covered, its secrets sealed until the next thaw, should anyone ever seek them. The sluice box, once a roaring conduit of hope, now lay silent, a skeletal monument to a summer's toil. He paused by the creek, its flow noticeably diminished, a thin skim of ice already forming along its banks. He knelt, scooping a handful of frigid water, splashing it across his face. The cold was a sharp, invigorating farewell. He had come here, a desperate man, seeking a dream. He left, a man fulfilled, carrying not just wealth, but a profound understanding of his own resilience, a wisdom forged in the crucible of the Yukon. The journey to Dawson, usually a solitary trek, now felt different. Each step away from his claim was a step closer to Mary, a step toward a future he had dared not fully imagine until now. The autumn leaves, a final defiant burst of color, crunched under his heavy boots, a symphony of departure. Dawson City, when he reached it a few days later, was a town in transition, a restless spirit preparing for hibernation. The frantic energy of summer had ebbed, replaced by a more subdued, almost melancholic buzz. The streets, still thick with mud from recent rains, were less crowded, the cacophony of voices muted. Many had already departed on earlier riverboats, their dreams either realized or shattered. Those who remained were either preparing for a long, isolated winter, or, like him, scrambling for passage on the very last vessels before the Yukon River locked solid. The air carried the scent of wood smoke, damp earth, and an underlying current of anticipation, both hope and trepidation. He walked through the familiar, yet subtly altered, thoroughfares. The saloons and dance halls, though still open, lacked the boisterous abandon of summer. He saw faces he recognized from his previous visit. Silas, the grizzled prospector, was nowhere to be found, his fate unknown. Other men, their eyes hollow, sat hunched over cheap whiskey, their gold pouches conspicuously absent. Then there were those, like himself, whose eyes held a quiet gleam, a subtle shift in their posture that spoke of success. He exchanged a portion of his gold, far more substantial this time, for an official bank draft and a hefty sum of cash, enough for his travel and immediate needs. The transaction was swift, the bank clerk's eyes betraying not a flicker of surprise at the sheer volume of his dust and nuggets. Such fortunes, though rare, were the very lifeblood of Dawson. Securing passage on the Sinucom Belle, one of the last stern-wheelers scheduled to depart, was a minor victory. The tickets were exorbitant, but the price was a mere trifle now. He spent his final hours in Dawson stocking up on provisions for the journey, allowing himself the small luxury of a hot meal and a proper shave. As dusk settled, painting the western sky in fiery oranges and deep purples, he stood on the riverbank, watching the last golden rays illuminate the crude, bustling town. He felt a profound sense of detachment, as if observing a chapter of his life closing. The Yukon had taken much, but it had given Morsui not just gold, but a self he had not known existed. The Yukon Belle was a sturdy vessel, her twin smokestacks belching black plumes into the cold morning air as she prepared for departure. Her deck was a microcosm of the gold rush itself, successful miners with bulging bags, their faces etched with relief and exhaustion, disillusioned prospectors, their dreams turned to dust, heading home with nothing but bitter memories, merchants and gamblers, looking for new opportunities downriver, and a smattering of women, some returning to established lives, others chasing the fading echoes of adventure. The miner found a spot on the upper deck, sheltered from the wind, and watched as the gangplank was raised, severing the last physical ties to Dawson. A long, mournful blast from the whistle echoed across the river, a final farewell. The journey down the Yukon River was a majestic, slow-motion unfolding of the vast northern landscape. The river itself was a powerful, unpredictable artery, its currents, swift and deep, carrying the Sinucom Belle with an almost imperceptible urgency. The pilot, a man with eyes as sharp as an eagle's and a knowledge of every shoal and snag, navigated the tricky channels with practiced ease. Along the banks, the spruce forests stood sentinel, their dark green boughs dusted with snow, creating a dramatic contrast with the golden yellow of the birch and poplar that still clung to their leaves. The air grew colder with each passing day, the threat of early ice a constant undercurrent, to the rhythmic thump-thump-thump-thump of the paddle wheel. Days blurred into a serene procession. He spent hours leaning against the railing, watching the panorama slide by. The sheer scale of the wilderness was humbling, and he felt a kinship with its raw, untamed beauty. He saw abandoned cabins, derelict sluice boxes, and the occasional lonely campfire on the distant shore, silent testaments to countless dreams pursued and often abandoned. He spoke little, but listened to the stories of others, tales of incredible strikes, of narrow escapes from blizzards, of fortune squandered, and of the enduring, often cruel, allure of the yellow metal. Some passengers, seeing his quiet confidence, attempted to glean secrets from him, but he offered only polite generalities. His gold was his, and his story was for Mary alone. The memories of his summer, the aching labor, the claustrophobic darkness of the shaft, the electrifying moment of striking the pay streak, played out like a vivid film reel in his mind. He found himself revisiting these moments, not with regret, but with a deep, abiding gratitude for the experience, for the man it had forged him into. After several days of navigating the winding river, the Yukon Belle finally docked at Whitehorse. The head of navigation, the transition was abrupt. The steady rhythm of the stern-wheeler gave way to the bustling chaos of the port. Here, passengers disembarked, their luggage and dreams transferred to the next stage of the journey. For many, this meant the challenging overland passage to the Pacific coast. By 1899, the White Pass and Yukon Route Railway was a marvel of engineering, a narrow gauge line snaking through some of the most treacherous terrain on Earth. Though not yet fully completed all the way to Whitehorse, sections were operational, offering a stark contrast to the grueling trails of just a few years prior. He chose to take the newly laid tracks for as much of the journey as possible, a concession to comfort after months of physical hardship. The small, puffing locomotive, a symbol of man's relentless conquest of nature, pulled its cars through breathtaking mountain passes. The landscape transformed from the broad river valley to rugged, snow-capped peaks, their granite faces scarred by ancient glaciers. The air grew thinner, colder, and the silence of the high country pressed in, broken only by the rhythmic clatter of the train and the mournful shriek of its whistle. He gazed out the window, mesmerized by the sheer audacity of the railway builders, men who had battled rock, ice, and impossible grades to forge this iron path to the sea. The White Pass, once a notorious death trap for men and animals, was now traversed in relative comfort, a testament to the rapid changes sweeping through the north. Yet, even from the warmth of the train car, he felt the ghosts of the thousands who had suffered and perished on those very slopes, their desperate hopes echoing in the wind. The journey culminated in Skagway, a town that had exploded from nothing into a notorious boom town during the height of the gold rush. Compared to Dawson's rough-and-tumble frontier charm, Skagway felt sharper, more predatory. It was a gateway, a point of no return for many, and a place where fortunes were often lost as quickly as they were made. The streets were still teeming with humanity, but the energy was different. Thondier restless, transient hum of people passing through, either arriving with feverish hope or departing with a weight of experience. Saloons, gambling dens, and brothels lined the muddy thoroughfares, their garish lights beckoning. The air was thick with the smell of salt, coal smoke, and unwashed bodies, a stark sensory assault after the clean, crisp air of the interior. He moved through Skagway with a quiet purpose, his gold safely tucked away in the backdraft. He didn't linger in the temptations of the town. His focus was on the final leg of his journey. He secured passage on a steamship bound for Seattle, a modern marvel that would carry him swiftly down the Inside Passage. Before boarding, he allowed himself one indulgence, a new suit of clothes, clean and respectable, a symbolic shedding of his prospector skin. Standing before a cracked mirror in a small Skagway haberdashery, he barely recognized the man looking back. His face was leaner, tanned by sun and wind. His eyes held a depth of experience that hadn't been there before. He was no longer just the miner who had left home. He was a Yukon man, marked by the wilderness, tempered by its demands, and enriched by its bounty. The steamship, the Size Islander, was a world away from the rough stern-wheeler. Her polished brass, plush lounges, and formal dining room were a jarring reintroduction to the comforts of civilization. The vastness of the Pacific Northwest's Inside Passage unfolded outside his porthole, seedy towering fjords, mist-shrouded islands, and dense evergreen forests clinging to precipitous cliffs. The rhythmic thrum of the engines and the gentle sway of the ship lulled him into a reflective state. He spent much of his time on deck, gazing out at the endless expanse of water, the salt spray a refreshing contrast to the dust and sweat of the goldfields. Among the diverse passengers, he observed the subtle class distinctions, the easy conversations of those who had never known hardship, and the quiet camaraderie of fellow prospectors. Some, like him, carried the weight of success with a humble dignity. Others, less fortunate, nursed their wounds and their whiskey in the ship's lower decks, their hopes dashed, but their spirits not entirely broken. He found himself less interested in their stories than in his own internal landscape. He replayed conversations with Mary, imagined their reunion, and planned the quiet, settled life they would build together. The gold, once the sole focus of his relentless drive, now felt secondary to the profound personal transformation he had undergone. It was a means, not an end. The Yukon had stripped him down to his essence, revealing a strength he had never suspected. The arrival in Seattle was a shock to the senses. The city, a bustling metropolis of electric lights, paved streets, and towering brick buildings, was an overwhelming assault after months of wilderness solitude. Carriages clattered over cobblestones. Streetcars hummed with a strange metallic whine, and crowds of people, dressed in fashionable attire, moved with a hurried, purposeful energy. He felt like an alien, a man out of time, his senses still attuned to the quiet rhythms of the wild. The clean suit felt both a comfort and a disguise. He knew he carried a fortune, yet he felt a profound anonymity, a fleeting sense of being both rich and invisible in this swirling vortex of modern life. He navigated the city with a quiet efficiency, his Yukon-honed practicality serving him well. He deposited his bank draft, now a substantial sum of US dollars, into a reputable bank, ensuring its security. The thought of Mary filled his waking moments, a gentle, insistent current pulling him homeward. He booked passage on the fastest train east, eager to bridge the remaining distance. The train journey was another marvel, whisking him across vast plains and rolling hills, a blur of telegraph poles and distant farms. Each mile brought him closer to the familiar landscapes of his youth, yet he knew he was returning as a fundamentally different man. Finally, the train pulled into the station of his hometown. The air was crisp, familiar, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and distant wood smoke. He stepped onto the platform, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. The station was smaller than those he had seen in Seattle, but it was alive with the gentle bustle of local life. He saw familiar faces, though none seemed to recognize the lean, weathered man in the respectable new suit. He took a deep breath, the scent of home filling his lungs, and began the walk toward Mary's house. The small, familiar cottage stood bathed in the soft glow of late afternoon sun, a wisp of smoke curling from its chimney. He paused at the gate, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for the latch. This was it, the culmination of his arduous journey, the realization of every sacrifice, every lonely moment under the vast northern sky. He walked up the path, his boots crunching softly on the gravel, a sound that suddenly felt foreign after months of wilderness silence. He knocked, a gentle rap that felt impossibly loud in the stillness. The door opened, and there she was, Mary. Her hair was pulled back from her face, a dusting of flour on her apron. Her eyes, wide with surprise, slowly registered recognition. A gasp escaped her lips, and then a radiant smile bloomed, dispelling all the years of separation, all the miles of wilderness. He stood on the threshold, a man transformed, his arms open, his heart overflowing. The gold, the wealth, faded into insignificance in that moment. It was the journey, the man he had become, and the love that had sustained him through it all, that truly mattered. They spoke for hours that night, by the warmth of a crackling fire, her hand clasped firmly in his. He recounted his adventures, the harsh beauty of the Yukon, the relentless labor, the terrifying descent into the earth, and the glorious discovery of the pay streak. He showed her the bank draft, a tangible symbol of their new future, but he emphasized the transformation within him, the wisdom he had gained. Mary listened, her eyes shining, sometimes with tears, sometimes with awe. She saw the changes in him, the quiet strength, the deeper resolve, and she loved the man he had become even more fiercely. With his gold, they purchased a modest farm outside of town, a place where the earth yielded its bounty not through struggle and isolation, but through patient cultivation and shared labor. He never returned to the Yukon, but its lessons remained etched deep within him. He carried the resilience of the wilderness, the quiet determination of a man who had wrestled his fortune from the frozen earth. He learned to appreciate the simple comforts of home, the warmth of a fire, the laughter of children, the steady presence of Mary. The gold had given them security, but the journey had given him peace. The whisper of hope that had drawn him north had indeed transformed into a song, a quiet, enduring melody of a life well lived, a dream realized, and a soul finally truly at home.